See what we got for gears and bearings and a carrier and stuff in it.
Yeah.
There must not be any backlash whatsoever in it, and somebody's had it apart and maybe swapped the, if this side was thicker than this side and they swapped the shims, it would move it this way.
Yep. In the sides there?
Yeah. It was discussed just a little bit in that thread. They make a tool that's called a differential spreader. That's a big square box that locks into these pins.
Right. And
it'll actually stretch that case enough that this will just fall out of it.
Okay.
But I don't know anybody that has one. Somewhere there's a shim that's not here. Not a big deal, but in one of them diff threads they were talking about taking these apart.
Right.
You probably can't get it on the camera, but they have a they should have an L in the middle of them. Part of this L should mean that they're left-handed threads. If you try to take them out like a normal thread, the normal bolt, you'll break them off because it's tightening them back down.
Okay.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with the carrier, really. I mean, it's not like it was part of an explosion or blowed up.
If lines are busy, call in. That's 1-800-900-1304. Great phone number. Hydrolyze advanced under eye cream. As we can in the next 24 hours. 1-800-900-1304 in the next 24 hours to find out how you can try Hydrolyze free for 30 days. They clinically celebrate by letting you try it absolutely.
Right, take the nuts off and put the take the washer off and put the nut back on it. I guess I could do one without the nut and one with the nut and show you what it does.
A world where I can access my money anytime, anywhere. I open a world where I can shop and pay my bills on my time. A place where I'm online, not inline. Where freedom is.
So you can see they're plenty tight. See, it came off. see the key in the. They've talked about making that key bigger, making it stronger.
Right.
But the way AMC designed it, all these little splines being pressed into the shaft are really what hold it. This is just locating.
Now, do you have to put that hub on that axle again? Are they supposed to be matched?
The technical service book will tell you you have to have a matched axle and a matched hub to go back together. You can't use a used hub on a used axle according to the technical service bulletin. But if you can't find a new hub to put on a used axle, what do you do?
Yeah.
No, this is the outer seal. The inner seal is actually in the axle tube.
Okay.
And I've cleaning things up, I took those out. But you can see how thin this one is. And this one is a whole bunch thicker.
Okay.
They come in different thicknesses so that you can set the end plate at a certain amount.
Got it.
And this is probably only a couple thousandths of an inch. Same with that one. You talked about the half moon shim coming out. This one is actually still stuck in the hub. It came off of the axle.
The shim or the key? The keyway?
The key is actually stuck in the hub. Came in the new kit. You could probably reuse them if you want, if one wanted to. They're nice and smooth and don't have any pits or anything in them, but it's cheap enough to buy a bearing kit. And driving this inner one has a shim behind it, and I don't really like to ruin the shim, but 9 times out of 10 the shims are so brittle that I break them trying to drive them out. But we'll see if I can.
There it is.
And that's the pinion depth shim everybody talks about.
Okay, so what's the shim exactly do then? What's it shim?
There's a spec of the pinion depth from the center of the axle line to the top face of the pinion, and because there's machining tolerances, there's a selective fit shims within, thousandths of an inch that set that depth of the pinion in its relationship to the ring gear.
Okay.
This is just an aluminum bearing driver. It doesn't have to fit exactly, but they make different sizes of them. The aluminum is way softer than the material of the bearings. So
Right. The difference in sound of the way it hits and the
Last time I hit it, this jumped a whole bunch.
Okay.
You can tell that it bottoms.
That's how you know it was seated down all the way.
Found the guy who thought radio stations should pretend to take requests and fired him.
There's that ring, huh?
Yep.
Okay, so the first one you put in was the rear pinion race, and the second one was the front pinion race.
Correct. Those are easier to on the bearing, doesn't screw up the cage, but it's big enough that it slides on and off. So I can put this on and this on, set it in here.
Now that just mounts up flush to the
Yep.
pinion. There's no spacer or anything in there, right?
Not unless you're using aftermarket shims that some of the shim kits come with 12-bolt Chevy shims and they fit between the bearing and the pinion. All this is an assembly lube. I have it handy because I do so much automatic transmission work. But you could use wheel bearing grease or something like that too. Now, and finally, I left the crush sleeve out, or the shim pack, whatever you want to call it, whatever you're putting back in it. I'm just gonna, this is just a temporary assembly to check the pattern.
So now you're taking the carrier bearings off, right?
Correct.
That's a pretty nifty tool.
And there's a zillion different pullers that'll pull these carrier bearings off of them, but almost all of them will damage them. This tool, you can pull the bearing off and it doesn't damage them. I've probably pulled several hundred off, and I can think of like maybe one that was damaged.
The year the IRS finds you. Just like rubber.
Basically said, well, we think you should pay us blank. There's no way that I can afford to pay blank.
And you know what the advance tax is.
We looked at all of this.
or log on to advancedtagsolutions.biz.
Unbelievable. It was the best investment I could have possibly made. This is my way to learn Spanish.
This is my way.
Rosetta Stone wants you to try absolutely.
Right.
Bronchitis?
Okay, this
Why?
rear end originally came with 315s, and I asked Roger to replace them with 354, so he's changing the
For only $8 a month.
gear out for me.
More people go.
Available at CVS Pharmacy, Rite Aid, and Walgreens. Prepaid cards. Apply. There, can I order?
Here she goes.
This one isn't the type that you normally would. I usually just set a file on here and
That's just to make sure there's no burr so that the other gear set's nice and flat.
right. It's hardened. You don't see much. I don't think it's in an area, but you can see a shiny spot right there that probably was a burr. It's outside of the flats that it would bolt to. Put these bearings on and set it back in the case and spin it without a ring gear and run a dial indicator on this and make sure that it runs true, that it doesn't wobble.
Okay.
If it wobbles, you know, if you have more than, I think there's a spec on it, a few thousandths of an inch. If it's more than that, you get the backlash changes. It'll get tighter and looser and tighter and looser as it changes.
AJAC tuning.
Onto, and there ain't nothing to.
Wanting what we want.
Right.
They set the preload and everything. I was just kind of wondering if that's really what they were, or as tight as they are, I think they probably are. So, we can go come up with some that are just a tiny bit thinner than this.
More people go with Visa.
Available at CVS
CVS Pharmacy, Rite Aid, and Walgreens reloadable Visa prepaid cards. Certain fees and conditions may apply.
You're ready to organize your finances the easy way, and Wells Fargo, we're with you. That's why we created our online tools, My Spending Report and Budget Watch, which come free with a Wells Fargo checking package. With My Spending Report, you can organize your spending, create budgets, and establish savings goals. With Budget Watch, you can put away.
Do it until you can measure a certain amount of in play and then go back to where you know it is exactly zero, but
So what's the object here now?
the object is to set this in here so there's zero in play, not too tight, but still at zero. And this is really close. I can move it just like about a half a thousand, trying really hard. So that's got to be pretty close to zero in play. When you're done, when we put the ring gear in here in order to set the backlash, you move shims from one side to the other, and then when you get the backlash where you want and the pattern where you want, you put 4 thousandths aside, 8 thousandths total, thicker shims in it to load the bearings so that they're in there tight, there's no in play.
That's the bearing preload then?
That's the bearing preload.
Okay, so you get the dial indicator hooked up, and the idea here is to check the carrier for trueness, right?
Yeah, you're checking the face that the ring gear bolts onto, and ideally it should be perfect. There should be no deviation, but I'm sure the book allows a thousandth or two or something. But the more deviation in this face, which we have almost none, less than a thousandth, the more deviation there is, your backlash will change as the gear goes. If this gets closer to the pinion or farther from the pinion, the backlash closes and opens. But this is probably as close to perfect as you can get. In the original ones, I have to be careful and double check and make sure they don't bottom out. But being a smidge longer, it makes them easier to start and at least start pulling the ring gear on. You should have plenty of depth. So being I've seen these come loose before, I'm going to clean all these holes and clean all the threads off and put a dab of Loctite on them before I torque them down.
Alrighty, explains that. That just a dab of blue?
Yeah, just a little bit of blue Loctite. It's a medium strength.
So they won't back themselves out eventually. Is there a torque spec on these, or?
Yeah.
Ring gear bolt torque spec, what is it, 65?
65 foot-pounds. Hopefully that'll be good.
So you go halfway first and then,
I might actually have all these too tight. They would click and then they would move just a tiny bit.
yeah.
At the bottom of it's full of about 180-degree water with detergent in it, and it's got a big high pressure pump that sprays the water and detergent out, and this turns.
Sweet.
Holiday specials. Like a Tools of the Trade Basics starter 12-piece stainless steel cookware set, $29.99.
Those are the ones you marked, right?
Or embroidered comforter set, $69.99.
Yep.
Pillows now $7.99. All regular price juicers and blenders 40% off. Tag for another
Blinded. I can't see my marks.
Put your foot down on quality. Thanks to Select Pergo laminate flooring, just $177 a square foot. More savings.
The torque spec on this.
Same, 65 foot-pounds. About 2/1000 of backlash.
So that's a little too tight.
Yeah, the spec is 6 to 10, so I need to make this shim thinner and this one thicker, and then we'll move the ring gear away from the pinion and make more clearance.
Got it. Okay, so the shims you had that are closest to you now were actually thinner than the ones on the other side, so you're going to reverse them to move the carrier forward enough to get more backlash.
Yeah, this shim pack was over here, and it's the thinnest shim pack.
Right, I got you. That makes sense. And then you're going to mock it up again and see where you're at, because 2/1000 wasn't enough backlash. You're going to try to shoot for 4 to 6, which is what spec is.
6 to 10.
Oh, 6 to 10. All right. Okay, so this is the second mock-up.
Well, that's right at the outside edge. A couple thousand, or it's about 10 thousandths, might be 10 and a half thousandths. But I'm going to look at what the pattern looks like. And if we have to change the pinion depth, we'll have to if you move the pinion closer or farther away, that changes the backlash too. So if we change the pinion depth, I'll have to move that just a little bit.
So do you check every so often?
Yeah, I check about three places. Actually, sometimes you can run this through numerous times, 3 or 4 rotations, and sometimes actually the best place to read is not where you put the gear or put the marking compound, but where the gear transfers it onto a nice clean tooth, and sometimes you get a really nice pattern.
I got you. In between where you've got them marked.
In between where you got them marked. And this one might show up pretty decent too. And this is an area that I actually put the grease on, and it's pretty well wiped off of right here. And that's kind of the pattern you want. You really want a pattern that's right in the middle of the tooth. And there's a drive side, which is this, and there's a coast side, which is the back side. It's actually, I would consider it the drive side in reverse too. But when you're going forward, the ring or the pinion is actually pushing against this flatter area of the tooth, driving it, making it go forward. And you want a pattern that's right in the middle. You don't want it too deep down into and you don't want it to run off either end. And it seems like a high performance type diff, they want the pattern a little closer to the inside edge, because under weight loads, it presses the pattern out more. So if the pattern with no load starts out here, it lengthens out under a big heavy load.
Okay.
But you can look at, it's tough, I'm sure it's tough to see on the camera. There's an area right here that's totally clean, and then it starts to squish out, and there ends up being quite a bit of grease out at the very outside edge. And the same with the coast side, which would be the power side backing up. You can see that there's grease in there, so it's not too far in, and it comes clear up. Starts to be some here and there's some out. But usually if you've got a pattern that runs clear off the end, one end or the other, the tooth running off the end is part of what causes the whine and howl. If you get the pattern set up so the contact is right here in the middle of the teeth on both sides, it works out pretty decent. 4 thousandths thicker than this.
That's for the bearing preload then?
That's for the bearing preload.
So now you've determined that this wear pattern is okay, and so you have to take everything back apart and add the 4,000 shim on each end to load for the preload on the bearings.
And being you're using selective shim for the pinion crush also, we'll have to pull the pinion back out and put that in and determine put the nut on there just so that I don't drop the pinion, no way, no how.
Yep. Between the crush sleeve and the one we're going to put on the solid sleeve with shims.
This is designed to crush slightly until you, as you tighten the nut, and you tighten the nut until you get a certain amount of rotational torque.
Okay.
And this one, you set the thickness so that you can just tighten this to 125 foot-pounds, and this can't change, and you change the amount of shims until you get the right amount of rotational torque. In a performance type application, continually, you know, dumping the clutch and pounding the gears, this can actually crush even more. It allows this stack up to end up being loose, and the nut ends up coming loose, and it all comes apart.
Call 970-476-4849.
Save $750 and get a free flyaway for two. 20 NOW.
So you just lube that up so that the threads don't get screwed up, huh?
Yeah. Up and down play either.
So you pretty much nailed it, you think?
Well, I've never put one of these in before, so I don't know if decreasing it by 0.02 raises the rotational torque by this much. You know, how much do I need to decrease it to get it to where I want?
It's not just a radio station, it's also a state of mind, like depression or panic.
I'm sure that's not enough. See, that's still almost zero rotational torque. If this was tighter, you see how the dial changes? You know, you want some kind of torque like that, but this is still too loose. But they're not talking about the torque of this nut. When you use a crush lead, it's whatever torque it takes to tighten it down so that you have a certain amount of rotational torque measured in inch-pounds. And using this solid crush sleeve, we need to make the shim thin enough to where it takes about 15 inch-pounds of torque to rotate this.
Okay.
15. If you can watch the dial, I'm right there at the 12 or 15.
Here it is. So the specs were 10 to 15?
Remember,
15 is what the...
to get that rotational force with that solid shim in it, you can torque it to, I mean, the instructions say 125, but even if you torqued it to 150 foot-pounds, it's not going to crush, it's not going to change your bearing preload any, and the nut's solid, tight, nothing that can really be done short of a bearing coming apart and blowing up is going to make things loose and allow that nut to back off.
Whereas in the crusher, you can actually overdo it.
The crush lead they found in drag cars, they could set the bearing preload and go out and race the crap out of them and come back and the nut would come loose and the crush sleeve would be crushed more.
Gotcha. So this whole process of getting the right shim depth and all of this, taking it apart 3 or 4 times to get it perfect, was so that now you can take everything back apart one last time and put the seal in, whereas if you'd have done it the other way, you probably would have gone through several seals.
Correct. Use a rag with some brake clean on it to clean those threads off so they're good and clean.
Jack FM, playing what we want.
Most kits come with a new pinion nut. I use it last one time, and I use a little bit of blue Loctite on it.
So all the other stuff you did, you were using the old nut.
Right.
So the bearing preload total is 8 thousandths. So you found a shim 4 thousandths on each end.
Yeah. Picky, so we'll check the backlash one last time. Selected these, I mean, I'll have to run the gear pattern again. When I selected the shims for adding the preload, I only added 3 thousandths on this side and about 5 thousandths on this side, so I actually moved it a touch because our backlash before was right at the very outside edge.
So now it's within.
Well, it was 10, which is within spec, but spec is 6 to 10, so maybe a microscopic little tiny bit, but
And double check it anyway.
And as I suspected, we pretty much still have the same type of pattern. See, this is an area that I never even marked, and you can see the grease on it.
Yep.
And it greases it. I mean, you can tell where it's lightening up the pattern, but right there in the middle. The same down here. You have a pattern most of the way across it.
Yep.
That's the coast side.
So are you happy?
I'm happy.
Get your free diagnosis at doublemyspeed.com and keep your computer running fast. Your free diagnosis at doublemyspeed.com is easy and fast.
You lube the outside of that before you put it in?
No, I actually just moved the inside where it rides against the shaft, so it's got a little bit of pre-lube on it.
Okay.
With your slow computer.
Please listen to this. Hi, it's JoJo, and if you or your business are in this situation, I urge you on the Denver Business Journal. When you think there's no help, there is. It's Larson Financial.
It's time to press the old wheel bearing off the shaft.
It's your turn to sit anywhere in the movie theater and see the movie. It's your turn to enjoy the beauty of the fall smell and be in the element.
There it is.
It's your life.
Yep, forces grease up through all the little spots between the bearings.
Sure.
Pretty much the same deal as pressing the pinion bearings on,
Right?
except for the axle's 3 feet long or something like that.
North Korea.
I know when I picked that up from my buddy, we had trouble getting that. Remember the axle was out?
Yep.
We had trouble getting that to slide in too. So all it was that bolt right there was in too far.
That one has shims in it to change the axle end play.
So only one side has the shims for the axle in play?
Yep. Inner seal and the outer seal keeps just grease in here, and no gear oil should be able to get in it. I think grease can probably work its way all the way out of this flange. So I put a light coat of sealer on it. Really light coat of sealer.
And the dust cover?
And technically, if anything leaked out, it would get caught in this and leak down and leak out this hole. In theory.
Slowing down your computer.
You can look in as little as 90 seconds risk-free. You must call in the next 10 minutes. Instant Effect is now available at Ulta stores. To find out how you can try it risk-free, call 1-800-339-1464. When this offer's gone, it's gone. 1-800-339-1464
For free at TurboTax.com. It's free to prepare, free to print, and free to e-file. No wonder TurboTax is the most trusted brand of tax software in America. Visit
New brake pads or shoes. That's new brake pads or shoes installed, just $79.99 per axle. Total car.
Alright, so now what's the purpose of the shims on, and it's only on one side, huh?
Well, the shims set the axle in play, and there's supposed to be a small amount of in play. I think 4 or 6 thousandths or something. I'll have to look it up. But they're only on one side because you're really setting both axles in play, because the axles touch in the center through a rubbing block, and really you only need to adjust one side. So it looks like there's really only about 2 thousandths in play. I think that's too tight.
So you need to add a spacer, right?
I need to figure out what I have. This is all of yours. I think we're right at 4.
So let me see if I got this right. The first time, you only had about 2 thousandths in play. So you added a thicker shim by 2 or 3 thousandths, then you brought it up within spec, which is in between 4 and 6. Is that correct?
That's correct. So probably piss the next person off that has to take it apart. Make it anywhere near what it looks like. I just put enough of that there to stick the gasket to it and make sure it don't go anywhere.
Yep.
Please listen to
And this, where the splines are at, is tapered a little bit.
Right. And there's the keyway. So you line up the keyway, and as you torque that to the required 250 pounds or whatever, then it forces the hub onto the splines and
there's a measurement here that you're supposed to meet also. Like I said, those need torqued when it's back in the car.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like there's no way you can get 250 pounds of torque sitting on a jack stand, so your recommendation is to get it all put together in the car, put the car in the ground, torque it, and then take it apart and loosen it and retorque it?
I would go drive it and then retorque them again.
Okay. Well, here it is. My rebuilt AMC 20 rear end. Gonna be going in 72 Gremlin X. Thanks, Raj. Appreciate it.